to the cloud. Welcome to the WordPress Lehigh Valley July Meetup. We're meeting online because we love each other so much. Tonight we have some people from Termageddon. Am I saying that right?
You did?
Yes.
I'm going to let them introduce themselves and do their presentation. They do privacy and I don't know if terms of service is part of that also. Automated for your site, but we're hoping to learn a little more about what we should be doing for our clients. So take
Awesome.
it, and I think you guys can just take control.
Sounds
Awesome.
good. Do you want to share the presentation?
Yeah, we can introduce ourselves
Well,
first.
it's in the presentation.
Oh, it's in the presentation.
Someone looked at the slides.
Yeah, if you share your screen, it should work. If not,
Okay.
you know.
You have to,
Here we go. That's working. I'm seeing
can
the
you see
screen.
the slides?
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So, you know, this is a topic that can be very intimidating for people, but we're going to try to break it down, make it simple and easy to understand. And what we're going to talk about is what you need to know about privacy requirements for the websites that you build.
There we go.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about what websites need to have a privacy policy, what privacy laws can apply to the websites that you build, and what the future of privacy requirements for websites looks like. And so I'm Donata, and this is Hans, and we're both the co-founders of Termageddon, which is a generator of privacy policies, terms of service, disclaimers, and more for websites and applications. So me, I'm the attorney of the bunch. I'm the legal brain behind Termageddon. I'm the one that engineered all of the policy questions, all the policy texts, and all of the different options that we offer. I'm a certified information privacy professional, and I'm the newsletter editor of the American Bar Association's e-privacy committee and the chair of the Chicago chapter of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. So basically my entire career is focused on writing stuff that nobody reads. That's not true anymore. But that is what my work is focused on, is drafting privacy policies, terms of service, other policies for websites, and making sure that those policies are up to date with the law.
Yeah, and my name's Hans. I'm the other co-founder of Termageddon. I oversee sales, marketing, and web agency partnerships. I'm more so like kind of the operator of the business model. You know, we'll get into it shortly, but well, I guess we don't really get into it because it's more of an educational program. But with our program, we give web agencies a free set of our policies in the hopes that they like our product so that they can use our referral or our reseller programs to offer our services to their clients. So yeah, I oversee sales, marketing, and partnerships.
Yeah, so we'll start off with what websites need to have a privacy policy. I know that that's a question for almost everyone that builds websites. Like, you know, if you build a website for a small business, like a pizza shop or a library or just like a local plumber,
Nonprofit.
Yeah, do they really need to have a privacy policy? So that's the first question that we're going to try to answer here. So we only have one definition in this because definitions are boring, but this one is super important in my opinion, and that's personally identifiable information, or PII. So PII is any data that could identify somebody. So for example, name, email, phone number, or physical address. And usually small business websites will collect that information during a contact form or a newsletter sign-up form. So really any website that has a contact form will collect PII. And any website that collects PII needs to have a privacy policy. So really when you're building a website, that has a contact form or a newsletter sign-up form, that's really when that bulb should go off in your head saying, okay, I think this website needs a privacy policy. That's really the point at which you know that that's what they need to consider. So why does PII collection matter? I'm definitely one of those people that I'm not very likely to do something or believe in something until I understand why. And I think understanding why is really important, because otherwise it's just really information that's very easy to forget. So why does it matter that a certain website collects PII? And then also we're going to talk about what privacy laws can apply to the websites that you build. So why does PII collection matter? PII collection, use, and disclosure is regulated by certain privacy laws. And I think what a big misconception that a lot of people have with privacy is that, you know, they think that they need to share that information, or they need to sell it, or they need to use it, or they need to disclose it for privacy laws to apply. And that's not the case. Privacy laws will start applying to a particular website the moment that they collect that personal information. So that's very important to remember. If your clients don't sell or share information, that's great. That's great privacy practice, but that does not matter in terms of what laws apply to you. And privacy laws do a couple different things. So they can provide certain privacy rights to consumers. So for example, the right to ask you to delete their personal information. They can impose certain security requirements on websites, and usually they require websites to have certain disclosures. So these privacy laws will require websites to disclose what PII you collect. So for example, I collect email and phone number. What is done with that PII? So I use it to provide customer service, or I use it to send email marketing newsletters, and who that PII is shared with. So for example, I share it with an email marketing vendor such as MailChimp. And all of these disclosures that privacy laws require that you make, those are made in the privacy policy. And just to be clear, the above 3 points are the meat and bones of a privacy policy. They're not all of the disclosures that are required by privacy laws. So privacy laws have a lot of very obscure requirements as to what your privacy policy has to disclose. So for example, there's a California law that requires you to state how your website responds to do not track signals, even though that's a very outdated technology that has not been supported in 10 years. But that's a requirement, that's a disclosure requirement. So it's important to keep in mind that there are very, very specific requirements to what a privacy policy needs to disclose. And just because a privacy policy says, you know, what is collected, what is done with it, who is that shared with, that doesn't mean that the privacy policy is compliant by any means. You have to have all of the disclosures required by the laws that apply to you. So in terms of what laws apply to websites, we have quite a few laws here in the United States and outside of the United States that can apply to websites that collect PII. So you'll have the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. I'm sure everybody's heard about that one. Everybody was freaking out about this in 2018, and I'm sure they still are. Hopefully you'll have some time by the end to answer some questions that I'm sure will come up in terms of GDPR. There are 2 privacy laws in California. One is older. The new one, the CCPA, that went into effect January 1st of this year, and that will start to be enforced on has started to be enforced on July 1st. So that was about a week ago, that the Attorney General can now impose fines for violations. Nevada has a privacy law that was recently updated. Delaware has a privacy law, and Canada has a privacy law as well. Put that up. And maybe Hans can talk about how these privacy laws apply to businesses outside of those countries.
Yeah. So it's really important to understand that privacy laws exist to protect the citizens or residents of people of that country or continent.
I wrote websites
I
in
know,
there.
I
I'm
saw
sorry.
that.
That's a typo.
It's totally fine. I saw it too, and I was supposed to proofread this. So, so these privacy laws are out to protect their citizens or the residents of their country or continent. What is so important is that they're out to protect the PII, the personally identifiable information. Now, if you have a website and you're running advertisements to people in Canada or people in Europe or Delaware and so forth, that means you're trying to collect the personal information of those residents or those citizens of those areas. It is extremely important to understand that you do not need to be located in that state or that country for these laws to apply to you. If you are collecting personal information from people of these areas, you may need to comply with some or all of these privacy laws. And that's like the one thing I want, if you were to take away anything outside of the definition of PII, it is that when your website collects information from across state lines, you may need to comply with not one, but multiple privacy laws.
Right. So those are the requirements right now. So any website that is built right now or has been built since these privacy laws went into effect, you know, you need to make sure that, or your clients need to make sure that they are compliant with those laws. So, you know, having a privacy policy written right now is a great way to comply with existing privacy laws. Unfortunately, that is not the end of it. That's not the full extent of what's happening. So while we have a certain set of privacy laws that are in effect right now, the future of privacy requirements for websites looks quite different. So you guys, I'm sure, remember the Cambridge Analytica scandal where Facebook shared all of this personal information and everything was taken advantage of and used God knows how. Ever since that time, consumers have become more and more interested in the privacy of their PII that they provide to websites, platforms, and services. And because of that, these consumers have been pushing their legislatures to give them certain privacy rights. So I live in Illinois and I have very few, if any, privacy rights. And, you know, maybe that's kind of not fair because somebody who lives in California has all of these privacy rights, and maybe I want them too because, like, I'm not chopped liver compared to Californians, even though I kind of am, but whatever. But all of that consumer interest has been pushing privacy bills and privacy laws forward. And that's the future. So right now, there are 23 proposed privacy bills in the United States. You can find this tracker, which I constantly have to update, on our blog at termageddon.com/blog. And you can see this privacy tracker that is updated every week, every couple of weeks, sometimes every other day, because so many more states are coming out with their own proposed privacy bills. And that's the really important part to remember, is that you can have a privacy policy that's compliant right now, but what is your strategy to keep that privacy policy, to keep that website compliant in the future when changes occur? Because these bills aren't going away. I actually have a specific software that tells me the probability of them passing, and a lot of them are in the high probability. So it's actually very interesting to see how many states are taking this need from their citizens seriously. And maybe if I can zoom in on this tracker just a little bit so you can see, you know, we do break it down by certain requirements. So for example, all of those privacy bills would require websites to have a privacy policy that makes very specific disclosures, and each bill has different disclosures that would be required. Business size limit, some of these bills would apply to large businesses only, while other ones do not exempt small businesses from compliance. So regardless of your revenue size, regardless of how many employees you have, regardless of how much data you collect, you would still have to comply with these. Consumers can sue. Some of these would allow consumers to sue businesses directly for violations. So if anybody has been tracking the Americans with Disabilities Act lawsuits with websites, since consumers were able to sue businesses directly, the amount of lawsuits has exploded. So if consumers can sue directly, there will be a lot more lawsuits. These bills provide certain rights to residents of that state. So the right to see what data you collect about them, the right to ask you to delete it, the right to ask you to correct it if it's incorrect, right to opt out of marketing, right to opt out of the sale of their data. Some of these would actually impose certain duties, like fiduciary duties on people who hold PII. And most of them prohibit discrimination. So if somebody has exercised their privacy rights, they can't be charged more, they can't be treated differently than somebody who didn't.
Can we just go back to this real quick and I can
Sure.
speak on it? I just want to note this New York bill, as you probably have noticed, there is no business size limit, and consumers of New York will be able to sue businesses. So just to put that in perspective, New Yorkers are potentially, if this bill is passed, will have the right to sue any business located anywhere for having as little as a contact form without a compliant privacy policy. And I think like this is why we kind of funnily named our company Termageddon. Like it's a little excessive, but you know, we're trying to have people realize like this is 23 proposed privacy bills, and needing to comply with possibly all of them is kind of a nightmare for a small business owner. So yeah, I just want to note that particular bill. So.
Yeah, and I mean, most consumers and most of us would want one uniform federal privacy bill to govern everything, so we just have to comply with one thing. Unfortunately, that's not what is happening right now. So currently, on the federal level, there's about 4 proposed bills, all of which have a very low likelihood of passing. And most of the privacy community thinks that what's going to happen is we'll have dozens and dozens of states have their own privacy laws, and businesses are going to have to comply with those because privacy laws protect consumers, not businesses, so they can apply outside of state lines, which is a really big issue for small businesses having to comply with all of this. So we don't think that there would be a federal privacy bill to save us anytime soon. So this is definitely something that's not likely to go away. You know, all of these privacy bills are very different, but they do have some similarities. So they have broad application to businesses across the United States. Just because you're located in Pennsylvania does not mean that New Jersey's privacy law won't apply to you. They require websites to have a privacy policy. They require different disclosures to be made in such privacy policies. So as somebody who tracks those disclosures that need to be made, I can tell you it's flowchart upon flowchart upon flowchart of mapping these out, and it is a lot. And some of them might allow businesses to sue businesses, residents to sue businesses directly for failure to comply, and then impose heavy penalties per violation. What's really interesting in United States law, United States privacy law, is that there is a statutory limit that's placed as a violation, which is usually $2,500 to $7,500, depending on the severity. But that is done per violation, which means per website visitor whose privacy rights are infringed upon. So if you have 100 website visitors from California per month, that's $2,500 times 100. And that's how your fine would be calculated, which can be really, really high for, especially for small businesses. It's high for even medium-sized businesses, but for small businesses, it's really high. So that's, you know, the things that you should know are websites that have a contact form need to have a privacy policy. Privacy laws are changing, and there are privacy bills that are coming. And then clients not only need a privacy policy that complies with the current privacy laws, but also need a strategy for keeping that privacy policy up to date when laws change or new laws go into effect. So I know that people probably have a lot of questions, and I think we do have a couple minutes for those. I wanted to make sure we have at least 10 minutes left for questions. If you do think of questions after this recording, our emails are right there. It's just Sonata and Hans at Termageddon.com. You know, feel free to send us an email if you think of any questions after this webinar. You know, and make sure to check out our agency program as well. So we'll stop sharing our screen and then go to questions if there are any.
All right, we have to let me get my, we're still here.
I was afraid I was going to turn off the screen share to see everyone's face, and everyone was just passed out or missing.
I have a first question.
Yes.
So one thing with clients, when we ask them to have a privacy policy, they're like, yeah, whatever. But how do we, I mean, that means if we have that written there, we should be doing what it says.
So it's up to your client to be compliant with privacy laws. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. So because you're in the business of helping companies create a tool that will collect personally identifiable information, I think you're sitting in a wonderful opportunity to share with these small business owners, hey, I'm not a privacy attorney, but I can see in my industry that this is becoming a really big deal, and I think you need to look into having a privacy policy. And in this, I just sent over a link, and sorry, this always, I always want to keep these educational and not salesy, so I apologize. So for the record, I'll say you can change the wording and get Termageddon completely out of what I just sent over and just use it on your own. But this is a website policies waiver. And this is what a lot of our agency partners will share with their clients and have them sign before undertaking a new website project or before taking on a hosting client or maintenance client. And basically it's a waiver. The first page explains everything we just discussed. And the second page asks the client to just sign an agreement saying that they understand that you're not their privacy expert. You're not responsible for privacy law compliance. I think it's a good idea, whether or not you use Termageddon, to have this get documented so that you can show that piece of paper in the unfortunate event if your client were to get fined or sued. And it has an option saying that they can choose not to have a privacy policy. It's up to them. They're the business owner. They're the ones taking the risk. Great. You don't want one? That's fine. I just want to document it that you don't want one. And that we did have this discussion. Because
that you were told that this is a good thing to have.
Yeah.
In my cases, I've been telling clients, you have to have one.
And that's probably the best move because that's reality. If you have a contact form and you get inquiries across state lines, especially, you have to have a strategy to stay up to date with these privacy laws. Have to, so.
Great. All right. Thank you. This looks great. Everybody else just jump in there.
Hold on, Mike.
All right, hold on.
Yeah, can you put some kind of disclaimer on a website and say, listen, don't give us anything you don't want shared. That's our policy.
No, so pretty much every single privacy law says that you cannot have an opt-out of privacy rights clause. So you cannot have something on your website that says, I understand that I have no privacy rights on this website. That does not work. It's actually forbidden by statute.
So can I say that, well, we're going to share all the information we get with whoever asks at any particular time. That's our policy. So I wouldn't be opting out.
The law will actually say, so if you read the actual law, it will say you need to provide the categories of third parties with whom you share personal data. So you can't just have a blanket statement that says, I will share this with anyone that I want. That would be against the law.
It would seem like you'd have the normal consumer protection laws that are already there. Most of this appears to be just another legal boondoggle for attorneys to harass. I mean, you wouldn't share medical data, and I do have medical sites. And when there is transaction stuff that I usually hand off to but there's no way these little websites across the country are ever going to get all this. And I put policy terms, but nobody wants to fill them out, right? And I don't want to set policy for all these different websites. And I can't really advise them to go spend money on attorneys to figure out every little thing because it'll never end.
So I'm in complete agreement with you. I think it's a joke. We are definitely not in support of every single state proposing their own privacy bills with their own unique disclosures. That's a nightmare. As a business owner, I'm saying that's a nightmare. And granted, it will keep us in business, but that's outside of that, I have no other interest other than saying that I think we should have a unified privacy law. The fact is, though, whether we like it or not, these things exist. And that's why we want to have these types of conversations, because there are strategies out there from all spectrums of affordability. Yes, you can hire a privacy attorney for $10,000 a year to monitor this, but more realistically, a generator that's backed by actual privacy attorneys might be something to look into as a potential solution too. But I think the statement, you know, these people created these laws so attorneys could have field days. I think that might be a leap. I don't know. I think these people create law. I think a lot of government agents create these laws without really fully grasping technology, and they don't really know what they're signing themselves up for, which I think is unfortunate. And I think attorneys can take advantage of that, sure.
I have a question. What is your liability on these? Like, what if a website you provide the policy for, what if a website gets sued? Where do you guys stand on that?
So we have we obviously have our own professional liability insurance, but we are a tool. We are not a law firm service. So we do not provide legal advice or legal services. And we do that in the hopes that we can provide an actual solution that won't cost a small business $10,000 a year to get a solution. So that's the trade-off that we made the decision, you know what, we want to help the masses, so we have to go as low of a price as possible. What I can say is no client of ours has ever been fined or sued. That's not to say it won't happen eventually, but you know, we're going to let that time when it happen. We'll let that come when the time happens. The fact is that our entire business model, our entire livelihoods is based on the fact that we're doing this right, and that we are getting, you know, the sign-offs of other privacy attorneys to say, yeah, this looks good, nice work. So if we screw it up, I mean, it's over for us. So we have all the interest in the world of making sure they're the most comprehensive privacy policy generators in the world. And we actually just launched a month ago our law firm program. So similar to web agencies, where we give web agencies a free set of our policies, so that they can, you know, use our reseller affiliate tools. We actually just launched that for law firms, and the response has been actually phenomenal. We have lots of law firms using our platform as the foundational tool to generating their clients' policies.
Yeah,
So
except
the
they
law
never did.
firms are creating the policies for their clients using your tool?
Yeah. So they're creating the policy for their client, slapping a $5,000 bill on it and selling it. Yeah, it's.
Well, the value that they add is that they do review the policy, because our policies have an override feature where they can change the wording to whatever they wish. So I like to think of it as that rather than charging, you know, $10,000, $15,000, now they can answer a few questions, get the policy generated, and then quote them to edit that policy, which I think hopefully at least drives down the cost for the small business owner.
So I guess I'm confused, because you can have a policy, but what if you as the site owner aren't obeying your own policy?
That's a great.
Yeah, that actually goes into, you know, what you guys mentioned about consumer protection laws. So it is against the law to lie about your privacy policy. So for example, if your privacy policy says that you don't sell PII and then you actually end up selling it and you never told anybody, you can definitely get sued for that. So it's up to the business owner to make sure that they're following their own policies, right? So after you create your policy, you read it and you make sure that you follow it, right? It's just like with any other contract that you would have.
And the other thing I want to note is a lot of people think they don't share the information they collect, and we very quickly find out that's not the case. For example, when a form is submitted on a WordPress website, the data is often stored in the WordPress backend. And there's often web agencies that could technically see that data. That's a great example of when you share personal data with parties that need to operate the website. Very often, websites install Google Analytics. Therefore, you are sharing that data. You are sharing IP address and interactions regarding, or information regarding your interactions with your website. You're sharing that data with what are called data analytics providers. So that's a big misconception. A lot of people think of the word share, they instantly think of the word sell. Sharing and selling data is very different. Sharing is very natural in our world. It's the selling part that kind of makes people feel a little uneasy.
The California Attorney General would disagree with you.
Really? What do you mean?
I'm not going to get into
I
it.
love this. I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Well, for anyone who, for 99.9% of our websites in our system, it is no one actually sells data. They're sharing it with you know, with the examples I just shared.
Yeah, they're sharing with MailChimp or Constant Contact
Exactly.
or any third-party
Yeah.
app you're using to communicate with people. That's where it goes.
And
That's
another
where it
fun
is.
fact, there's a very big misconception in the industry where everyone thinks you have to list the actual company that you share data with. That is actually not correct. That comes from the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, but that's actually one of two ways to comply with GDPR. The other way is to simply share the categories with whom you share information with. And why we like going that route is because GDPR also says your policies should not be longer than they need to be. So therefore, I mean, you can list every single company you share data with, or you can just share the categories. Obviously, sharing the categories will minimize the length of the policy. Therefore, that's why we think it's the best way.
And also, if you change service providers, then you don't need to like update your policy every 5 seconds if you change from like MailChimp to Constant Contact.
Yeah, it's a good call too.
So you're saying I'm somebody who, like, I have a client who is a crisis pregnancy center, and they take information about appointments, and I have nothing to do with their day-to-day practice, but I look at their website and I could see all that information. So would that be considered sharing because I have that admin access?
Yeah, so they'd be sharing it with what you would term like parties that need to operate the website. So if you can access that data from the back end and see it, obviously with your client's permission, that would be sharing data.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, my boss, we've bought your product for several of our, it's sitting on our website, and we have a lot of businesses in California, and it has been, the easiest thing for us has been, we have apprised you, and if you don't want a privacy policy, we have a hold harmless document we're asking people to sign.
Nice.
Yeah, right when you said bad hand.
It's like we've told you this exists. Like now whether or not they go with you or not, that's fine. That's their business. But
Right.
it's like we have apprised you, and if you don't get if you've decided you do not want a privacy policy, here is the hold harmless document against us. We have told you what you do, it's on you, but we've made it clear we think you should take action on this.
The right way to do it. Like I've seen so many agency contracts where they say, we guarantee that this website is compliant. And I'm like, no, why would you ever guarantee that? Because at that point, you're guaranteeing that it's complying with privacy laws, with ADA.
Yeah, like we're fine. Like if they want, like I said, a lot of our clients are faith-based nonprofits. You know, if they have, John Doe, who's the lawyer down at so-and-so congregation, and he wants to take this on, whether he's competent or not, you know what, that's fine. That's on you all. That's how we feel about it. But it's like, it just protects us for saying, look, we've presented this to you. If you think you have another solution out there, that's fine. And it works. And then the companies that have gone with you, it's been really seamless, because I used to be the poor person who had to sit there and like do the type and replace on all the privacy policies. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this again.
I used to do that all the time. And it was when GDPR came out where I was like, this doesn't feel right anymore. Like it already kind of felt weird taking it, and copy and pasting from a competitor, not to mention that's copyright infringement, but outside of that little detail, it's just getting weirder. And I like to think of it this way. Like 5 years ago, we all used to look at SSL certificates as like a nice thing to have, okay, it was required for e-commerce websites, but it was kind of nice beyond that. Nowadays, when we go to a website that isn't secure, like I literally feel like I'm sick or something. I'm like, oh, I got to get off of here. Like I don't feel safe anymore. And in 5 years that occurred, and I think privacy is going to be the exact same story. Right now, we're confused, maybe a little upset that we have to invest time and energy into figuring it out. But 5 years from now, we're going to look back at this time and be like, remember when companies used to just take your data and they could just do whatever they wanted with it? Like that day will come. It's an unfortunate new layer of responsibility because, I don't think the mass majority of small businesses are doing anything maliciously, but whether we like that or not, there's going to be people.
I mean, it is interesting. Like I've had, my email address is lauracristiano@gmail.com. My name is not a particularly common name in the United States. My name in Italian speaking and Spanish speaking countries is roughly equivalent to Mary Smith. So I frequently end up with somebody who has typed my email address, meaning theirs, because their name is laura.cristiano@gmail.com or lcristiano@gmail.com. And I have found myself signed up for all manner of,
Oh no.
you name it, I have been signed up for it. Including somebody whose tax bill I perpetually was getting from Portugal. That was fun.
Oh.
So, but I will say that GDPR has been invaluable in getting me to stop
Oh,
that
that's
from
cool.
happening, because I've just, I mean, I'll have to pull up Google Translate, but I literally, all I have to say is, you have misidentified me. I am not the Laura Cristiano who has bought this service from you. I demand under GDPR the right to be forgotten. I demand that you pull my record from everything, and you have never seen people spin around so quickly to get my name off of something. There was one company that was really slow. And I just on Twitter I said, I'm pretty sure you have a major GDPR violation going here. You have 48 hours to solve this until I approach the authorities. And you've never seen people like so quickly be like, oh, we're sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry. We're going to fix this. Who are you? We will fix this. Yeah.
Oh, and that's, as a human being, I love the fact that human beings have a right to their privacy. I think I think most Americans would want to fight for that to at least a pretty large degree, is that privacy is important. And that's what these laws are out to do. Whether we like that they're doing it 25 different ways, that's an issue in itself. But the fact is, I love the fact that human beings have a right to their privacy. Like these are rights to tell companies, get rid of my data, and they're going to have to. And I think that's worth fighting for, without a doubt. Now, on the flip side, businesses of all sizes need to figure out, how do I address this fact that now, as a business owner, I have to deal with it. I have to figure out how to process, get my privacy policy and stay compliant with these privacy laws. So,
Can I ask you a question?
please.
About your services specifically. I see I didn't look in the nuts and bolts it, but I see that you have a monthly fee and that you're talking about keeping people updated. Say I were to sell this service to a couple of clients, how do you keep their privacy policies updated? Do you email them or me or someone directly, or is it tapping into your server somehow?
So when you generate a privacy policy, you get an embed code. And you place that embed code on the privacy policy page on their website, and that's how we can push updates. And we will email everyone that the license is shared with. So if you're the only person that has access to that license, then we'll email you notifying you of the change. If you've also shared it with your client, we will email you and your client saying that the privacy policy has been updated.
Does that embed code reflect the specifics of the website that it's on, like who the categories of service providers that they share their information with and things like that?
No, the embed code is embed code is a unique piece of code that pulls the respective policy from our database. So
yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean the code itself, but I mean the policy that it pulls. Is that specific to that client, or are there some like tokens, like where you have a generic token on your policy and then it gets replaced with the client's website name?
No.
I'm just wondering, is it one size fits all, or is there some customizing involved?
It's not. So the way that the policy generation process works, so you start off by determining what privacy laws apply to you, and then you answer questions about that particular website. So like, who do you share personal information with? What information do you collect? What do you do with it? And then you answer all of those questions, and then your answers to those questions are used to customize a privacy policy for you. So it's very customizable to the particular website. We have a lot of different options. And then we also have the option to override any of the text. So if you want to add something, delete something, change the wording, you can always do that. if you do manually override a text, we won't be able to update that particular section. But if the law changes and it affects that section, we will send you an email with our suggested copy, and then you can choose between the stuff that you wrote and what we suggest.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the privacy policy questionnaire, stage 1 of that questionnaire is to figure out what privacy laws you need to comply with. And that is 12 questions, roughly 12 questions. And it is wild. Based on how you answer yes or no, these 12 questions, you have a fundamentally different set of questions afterwards.
Okay.
And that just showcases, at least to me, how scary it is that so many people say just use a template. Because
Right.
like there's all these yes or no questions, and based on that, you have a fundamentally different set of questions to eventually generate your privacy policy. It proves that templates are just, they're high risk. It's probably 1 in 144 chance that you get you get the right one. Yeah, like you get the right template.
Combination.
Yeah, and then on top of that, do you even still have a strategy to keep it up to date?
But then who should be filling that out? Because I'm thinking of a client specifically, and it's a large nonprofit museum. So I'm like, does the executive director, does the head of the board? I mean, who is the one who should be? Because I'm like, I'm not filling this out.
Yep. So
It would really be anybody who knows the privacy practices of that organization. So usually any larger organization will have a person that's responsible for like IT, security, privacy, compliance, legal. So I think any of those people would have a familiar enough understanding of that organization's privacy practices to fill that out.
And the other thing I would note is that, you know, I'm kind of more the realist. I know that a lot of these small business clients have no idea how their website works. And that's why our license is set up so that you can share the license with your client or vice versa. If the client uses your promo code and pays directly, they can share the license with you. Either way, you both can do a screen share and go through the questions together. Like, you know, a question like, do you use Google Analytics? I've heard many people say, I have no idea what that is. And then I take the Chrome extension and test it. I'm like, yeah, you have Google Analytics. So, but like a web designer, this is second nature. Like, you know, you know what they have. You know if the newsletter sign up communicates with an email marketing provider. Like, so it's very clear with these privacy laws, in my opinion, that, well, it's the client's responsibility. It is their job. They should be the ones filling it out. But I think like screen sharing and like just guiding them, like helping them just answer those technical questions will help them.
Wait, okay, that's good to know. Go ahead, Mike. Look at Mike
Come on,
raising
Mike.
his hand like a nice man who went to school in the 70s.
Yeah, kind of. Occasionally. All right. I have had the unfortunate experience to work with a lot of attorneys. A lot. And I'm actually one of them, and I'm actually involved with the website for them. And I know they're going after this stuff. In fact, one law firm, they're going after unsolicited texts and, you know, the old unsolicited phone calls, which is, they're making money on it. This is going to be a field day. So I want to ask a couple specific questions, and you probably aren't going to be able to answer. But one, I'm worried about these jurisdictions with different laws and how another country can come in and sue me. You know, and first, like, I didn't even want to do business in California. The other thing is one of the products I was working with was experimental treatment for dying people, and it worked pretty well. But I wouldn't take any comments. I wouldn't solicit. I wouldn't sell on the site. And they would approach me by email, and I did all the business through email. And there's no Google Analytics on it, and it's still an active site. But I'm still concerned. Like, yeah, I don't know. If they give you submit willingly through email, what is my liability?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just start by saying that this is not legal advice.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I got that.
Yeah.
I'm not hurting for legal advice. I want to shoot myself. I've got some legal
But
advice.
websites that don't collect any personal information, so that don't have any cookies, that don't have analytics, that don't have a contact form, that don't have a newsletter sign up form, under regular privacy laws, they don't need to have a privacy policy.
So all you have is a contact email that saves most of the, protects, avoids most of the liability. Okay, that was my thinking. Now the question is what happens with, like, I'm in Washington, and Washington is kind of messed up, but if my businesses are in Idaho and in, well, mostly Nevada. What if Nevada laws say one thing and New York says something different? How do my clients resolve that conflict? Right?
So,
I mean, you follow the state. You don't want to do business with New York anyway. You can't say nobody from New York, or can you? Can you say, hey, this is for the people of Washington State. We don't want any business from California. Can you do that?
you know, some websites do that. Other websites will try to block people from certain states by IP address. The issue with that is that the moment that you collect the IP address to figure out what state they're from, the privacy laws
It's a joke,
which is
right?
insane. But
So if you say, not that I want to do business with everybody, right? The stuff that I want to have, people want and need usually. But if I say that we don't do business with California, so if you do business with at your own risk, does that give me I'm probably gonna have to, you can't give me legal advice on that, but does that come up at all in any of your conversations?
California Online Privacy Protection Act, that law will start applying as soon as you collect the personal information of anyone from California through your website, right?
Okay.
So if your contact form could potentially say, if you're from California, you're not allowed to fill this out. I don't know. Like, what happens if somebody accidentally fills it out? I'm not sure.
Okay.
The issue with all of that is that it's significantly easier to comply with the law than to try to circumvent it, right? So it's a lot easier for me to add 3 sentences to your privacy policy so you're CalOPA compliant than it is for you to go to your website, update it, and say, don't fill this out if you're from California, and hope for the best.
Yeah, and I'm not actually advocating or even suggesting I would do that.
Yeah,
But it's a lot easier for you than it is for my clients who are never, ever, ever going to keep up with this stuff. Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to do as much as I can for them, but the law is changing, and I am not a lawyer either. So
The
I
only-
ask the questions for discussion. I'm sorry, for discussion purposes. But and thank you for your responses too.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of that's even a little bit like that is I know we have a couple clients that are insurance firms, and they specifically only do business in certain states. So they for sure, like, they have like some forms online that are like instant quote forms and things like that. So kind of like the nature of the form, like one of the first questions you get asked is like, in what state is the property you want to get, a quote on or whatever. And we've made sure we've limited the form that it drops down only the states that they are licensed to do business in. And there's a little asterisk I mean, it says it plain as day on their website. We are licensed to give insurance in the following states, but people don't read things. But the forms that we use, we've tried to limit in the drop down, like they can only take information from like the 6 states that they're licensed in. Or I even think about like some of like the online alcohol sales and stuff, like wineries, like they're specifically allowed to sell wine in certain states, and you fill out like a little thing that says, where do you want to ship this to? And then you'll get this little notification that'll say, sorry, we can't help you, you're from Pennsylvania. I wonder if any of that kind of helps to circumvent some of what you're concerned about.
I think it potentially could be. I mean, in terms of conflicts right now in the United States, I'm not aware of any privacy laws that conflict with each other to the extent where you couldn't write it in a way that there would be no conflict. And with these proposed privacy bills as well, a lot of the people who write them will actually consult other states. And very interesting point as well, a lot of those privacy bills are carbon copies of each other. So they don't conflict. They're literally
To the website and copied it and filled out their name.
the only thing that they changed is the state name,
Right.
and the attorney general's name, and that was it, right? So, because they're so similar and because there's so many copies of each other, it would be very difficult for there to become a conflict and then for a conflict to be enforced in a court of law, because you can't have a conflict between 2 laws that apply to you. Like, that just doesn't that wouldn't work?
It's a great question, though. I've wondered the same thing. Like, I mean, there's 23. There's bound to be conflict, but there isn't yet. But that's not to say there isn't one day. We don't know. We don't know what that conflict is because we don't know it yet. So, like, when there is
We'll
one,
see.
it's going to be a discussion amongst privacy attorneys and privacy professionals
Well, the
for
thing
sure.
too is, like, before these privacy laws are passed, there's always a comment period. And you'll always have experts from certain fields come in and comment on those laws, and that's what's taken into account as well. So I'm sure that it would be taken care of in the comment and revision period. I mean, there's no way that that would just slip through.
So on the
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Go ahead.
I was just going to say on the WordPress side of things, you said once you start collecting a cookie, which I know now you go to a site, we have cookies, and if you don't want them, because I know WordPress just starts dropping cookies. I don't even think you have to log in to particularly get a cookie. I don't know if somebody could correct me on that.
So the whole cookie disclosure thing, that starts applying with GDPR and Canada's privacy law. So most businesses that just do business in the United States, that don't do business in the European Union, don't necessarily have to worry about this. So if I'm a plumber in Chicago and I service the Chicagoland area, I don't give a shit about GDPR. And the European Union doesn't give a shit about me either. So, you know, having these cookie consent pop-ups on every single website is just increasing the amount of money and time and effort and operational costs
And
that
annoyance.
businesses have to get through, and annoyance for users. So, you know, not every website needs it.
But
So
if I sell a ticket to somebody in Canada, I'm a museum in Pennsylvania, you can buy your tickets ahead of time, and you can be in Toronto and buy it.
At that
I'm
point,
responsible.
yeah. So if you're like a larger business, like if you're a museum or if you have multiple restaurants or, you know, you run a hotel chain, like, yes, that's absolutely something you should
you're a
consider.
real estate agent.
Like real estate agents, yes. But all I'm saying is that like really small mom and pop shops that do business hyper locally don't necessarily need to worry about something like that.
And I think it's important to note, like, I mean, here, this is a logic conversation because, theoretically, anyone from anywhere could visit any website.
Right.
But that's not how we're seeing these fines be issued by the data protection authorities of the European Union. Now, the first time Bob the plumber from Chicago does get fined for GDPR noncompliance, you better believe our alarm bells are going to be going off.
Yeah,
because
I
we're
will
gonna,
eat my hat if that ever happens.
we will have a lot of updates to tell our client base, like, all right, turns out no one's safe at this point.
Well, no,
you know,
because
like,
the guidelines have very clearly said just because your website is accessible from the European Union doesn't mean that you need to comply with GDPR. I mean, that's
Oh, it says that.
So you're probably you're in the range of like probability versus possibility, I guess, at that point. Like, what is the probability you are going to employ the plumber of Chicago versus the possibility you're going to fly the guy over from Chicago to, you know, the East End of London to service your bathroom. I mean, it's possible. It's just not probable.
right. Yeah, and all that says is, you know, if you just have a website, just because you have a website with no other connections, with no other factors taken into account, that doesn't mean that GDPR applies to you.
Good. That's good to know. I'm sorry to monopolize this. One more question. So my museum actually sells their ticket through a third party. Am I still responsible to have that? Is it my site or the third party who's selling it, which is, I think, like a Salesforce affiliate?
do they insert the data while on your website and then conduct?
No, when you click the button to buy a ticket, you actually are taken to their website.
Okay.
It looks a little bit like our website, but it is another website.
You'll definitely want a terms of service because the terms of service can say something along the lines of, hey, we offer links to third-party websites. We have no control over those third-party websites. Therefore, if you click one of those links and that website's hacked and you get hacked and all your data gets stolen, you can't come back and sue us. So that is a pretty standard language in the terms of service. It comes with every single one of the policies we create or generate. And then it doesn't sound like that particular detail would be why you would need a privacy policy. It would only be if you have like a contact form or Google Analytics on the website. But if that's all you have is a donate button and it goes to a third party, it doesn't sound like you need a privacy policy.
Now we have the other stuff too, but no, thank you. I was always wondering if you're using a third party, it seems like the third party would be responsible for but I still need to say I'm sending you to a third party.
Yeah.
That's correct. Now, the third party, it depends on technically it depends on the contract you have with the third party, because they may say, hey, we're collecting all this credit card information, but you have to have your own privacy policy. Technically, they could do that, but like something as big as payment processors, they most likely have their PCI compliance in line and have all that addressed.
What you also might have to watch, Kim, too, because I know we were dealing with a third-party vendor selling tickets at one point. So yeah, we were like very happy, like, yay, if they get hacked, it's on them. But we were able to pull the email addresses and the addresses of the people who are buying the tickets on the third-party system to our events. And then we could pull that into like MailChimp to send them an email to say, hey, do you want to subscribe for our season or whatever else? So there definitely was, you know, this sort of gray area on where, I mean, it was basically transactional, but, you know, there was this gray area on where we were getting information from. So you might have to think about that.
Yeah, and you know, I'll note first off, I've been there. I've been at that type of situation where it's like, oh man, I'm kind of emailing these people trying to get them for more business or something. I don't know if I should be. That's probably not going to be the best practice of the future. It probably won't be allowed, but that is a situation where a company is technically sharing data with you, which it would be on them to disclose that.
Yeah, and some privacy laws will require you to say the sources from which you get that personal information too. So
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
yeah, endless disclosure.
More things to look at.
Yeah.
Mike, regarding some of the things you were saying, I was thinking about, like, you know, you're saying attorneys are going to have a field day. I was thinking, like, when most of the privacy laws we have right now are pretty straightforward. Some are very complex, but, you know, some of these proposed privacy bills, like New York's, I feel like if a law like that passes, it's going to be as easy as writing a simple Python script that says scan every website to see if they have a privacy policy and a contact form. If they don't have a privacy policy and they have a contact form, fill out contact form with lawsuit. And then you just go around just robot scamming everyone. That's
Right.
what I think is going to happen. But I could be wrong, but I've been thinking about that lately.
No, I think if you're with the right resources, the compliance, no matter what they do, I mean, dealing with government, I was a public works contractor for a long time, so I know. But a lot of people aren't going to do that, right? And so you're going to see attorneys trolling, looking for people that aren't dotting their I's.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is going to happen. But Kim made a good question about the second parties. And then there's a Laura about what happens when you get information from that third party back. And I just want to clarify that. If I get emails or I get something from another party, am I got liability here, even though I didn't collect that information, that it's useful to me, and they didn't disclose it? Is there fall through liability I need to be concerned about?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, if you're, like, for example, I get emails all the time of people trying to sell me data, and I never buy it. So I don't understand why they keep on emailing me, right? But people will
Because I'm buying it. No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
you're not. Never approve that kind of purchase. But people will go through and scan WordCamp attendee lists and try to sell them to other people, right? And they claim that it's GDPR compliant. However, it's not, because the person whose email you took did not agree for that email to be sold, did not agree for it to be used for marketing purposes, did not agree for it to be scraped, did not agree for it to be shared. And at that point, both the seller and the buyer can be responsible if you end up using that data to send marketing messages. So taking data from places and using it without consent can be a big issue depending on what privacy laws apply to you.
Okay, a quick follow-up. What if someone forwards me an email? What happens is it's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, I didn't buy it, and I don't buy that stuff either. But I'm just trying to probe the depths of the coming liabilities. I do appreciate everything you're saying. I do think that most can get handled for anybody who wants to be reasonably proactive, or at least, you know, you'll come before the courts and say, yeah, you made a good faith effort, right? It's not doing it. right? But what happens when they forward me emails or they forward me a list of emails? And sometimes I'll get emails, you know, there'll be tons of
Humans who forget to blind carbon copy.
yeah. It's
So I think, you know, there are two different aspects to this. So one, the accidental sending of an email. So let's say Hans sends you an email with my social security number by accident, right? At that point, like, if you use my social security number to steal my identity, that's kind of on you, right?
right. Well, that would be a crime anyway.
Right.
I
But,
mean,
let's say you took that social security number, you deleted it, or like you didn't delete it, but it stayed in your email. I personally don't think anybody's going to go after you for like an accidental email sent. Another aspect of that is, you know, let's say you get an email with a bunch of people's emails listed. If you take those emails and add them to your MailChimp account without their permission, depending on what privacy laws apply to you, that could be a violation, right? However, if those privacy laws don't apply to you, maybe it's not
Have
a
fun.
violation.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
And yeah, and you do get a warning that says, I have permission to add these people. I mean, it's very easy for somebody just to go, sure, I do, click.
Yeah.
And they just, you know, they've imported the, you know, the 50 people that somebody forgot to blind carbon copy.
Yeah.
Right. But personally, like if I were to get an email like that with just a whole bunch of lists of emails, I would not use that data. Because when you really think about it, let's say you email 100 people and 100 of those emails are cold emails. You're maybe going to get like a 2% response rate.
At best.
If you email 100 people who specifically said, I want to receive your emails, they're going to be way more likely to purchase things from you, to engage with your brand, to work with you, stuff like that. So it's not necessarily just about violating these laws or violating these rules. It's also about respecting people's privacy and saying, you know what, you didn't consent to this, you don't want this, and I'm just not going to do it because that's kind of gross. You know what I mean?
I'm approached by clients though, who will give me lists like, oh, these are all the news affiliates in the state of Pennsylvania, put them on our MailChimp. And I'm like, no, did they ask to be on your mailing list? I was like, if you want to write them individually one time and say something from your account.
So that's a question though. That's a business. That's not a person. If I understand the privacy laws correctly, the privacy laws apply to individual human beings. Not that I want to go out there and spam every news service in the entire United States, because I don't know that that's productive. But like I could cold email like 40 news outlets in the tri-state area, and there's, as I understand it, there's no privacy law applies to a business. It applies to individual human beings, but not to businesses.
What about individual, like these are individual editors, like John Smith and Mary Doe at themorningcall.com. Is that a business or an individual?
I believe that's a business because you're working at an employer. You're not Mary Jo, private citizen.
I don't understand the question.
Yeah.
So you're saying that,
I understand her question. I don't understand what you're asking.
No, go ahead.
We could come up with all kinds of mind-blowing things.
Yeah, I mean, like I know when I used to work at a company, one of the things that we used to keep trying to drill into the employees' heads, which was really tough, was like your corporate email address is there for you to do corporate business on. Like you are not there to shop at Macy's. You're not there to email your niece. You're not like, this is your corporate email and you have zero right to privacy on this email. At any time, the IT department can come in and say, this is ours. Like that's how this works. There is zero right to privacy in that. So I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think any of this applies if you have even if it's like Kathy at abcnetwork.com, you have no right to privacy because that's a corporate item. That is not your personal item.
I can validate the IT side of things because I did it for 20 years, and anything that sits on any servers owned by a company is owned by the company. It's not private at all.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of like expectation of privacy in certain surroundings. So for example, at a workplace, you have an expectation of privacy in the bathroom, which is why you can't have cameras in the bathroom. However, you can have cameras in the hallway or at the front entrance because there is no reasonable expectation of privacy there. And it's similar when it comes to like corporate emails from the sense of the business itself accessing those emails. However, if I were to be a hacker and I were to hack ABC News Corporation, I can't just claim that that email wasn't private to begin with and therefore it's public and I can hack it. No, it's private in terms of how the company can handle that email. In terms of like how employees use their work email, you know, a lot of privacy laws will actually say that corporate emails are not personal data if those emails are used to communicate to that person about their job, about the services that they offer, about the products that they offer, about like something that's related to that company. So for example, if I were to email a newspaper, cold emailing them, trying to sell them ink that they can use on the newspaper, that would be a lot different than me saying, hey, Susie, here's some hair dye that I think you might like. You know, because that's like a personal email, that's a personal sale instead of using that information for business purposes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a consideration as well. I really would not recommend cold emailing people. Just in general, it just doesn't work that well. I think better results can be achieved through like Facebook advertising, and that comes with some set of privacy issues, but that's the issues that Facebook has to deal with, not you.
Well, I had a client once who said, can you get the email of everybody who visits my site? No, I cannot. I will not.
I think too, the mailing people cold, that's a different set of laws. There's anti-spam laws that.
Yeah, and there's actually very straightforward rules with that. Like have an unsubscribe feature.
Have your address on there, your contact information.
You are able to cold email people. That is kind of a misconception. You're able to do it. You just have to do it under. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You have to do it under certain rules, and I kind of disagree. Like I have a different opinion than Donata. I think cold emails are good when you are taking the time to actually email a real human being and like take the time to know about them. Like what
I guess I meant like automated cold.
Yeah,
emails.
automated.
Yeah.
Like cold. Yeah, cold.
Yeah.
Like you're not personalizing anything. Yeah, it's
Copy and paste.
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, one of the way less fun projects I ever had to do in my life, I used to work for the Archdiocese of Newark Catholic Schools office, and we had the academic records for people going back hundreds of years. So we tried to find our alumni. So we took the names and addresses off of records going back within the last 70 years and sent it off to a company to see if you could figure out where, you know, Tim Jones, who graduated whatever school in 1952 at this address, where is Tim Jones today? And could you also find Tim Jones's probable email address? And you would be shocked at how many of those actually came back. And then we were basically, you know, we ran this through legal and law firms and everything. And the short version is that we were basically allowed to email Tim Jones one time saying, hi, Tim Jones, we think you're the Tim Jones who attended so-and-so school at thus and such a time. We're trying to reconnect people with their, you know, former schools. If this is you and you would like to connect, yay. If this is not you or you don't want to connect, that's cool too.
Right.
Please unsubscribe. But like, there are services out there that you can pay big bucks and it's amazing what they can come up with just a name and an address, albeit one that's 50 years old.
Wow.
And they did it to success of trying to get alumni to donate back to their alma maters, some of which had not been in touch in like 40 years.
Wow. Huh.
And we just have a few minutes just so you guys know.
Yeah. Oh goodness, we keep talking and talking.
No, this has been really
But if
fun.
anybody thinks of any questions afterwards too, it's Pipetta.
I have a quick one. We've been going over the importance of a privacy policy, but what about terms of use / terms and conditions? Are those as important? I don't want to use the word important, but
No, I know where you're
You know what I
going.
mean.
Yeah, they're of equal importance. Terms and conditions set the rules using a website. So you very much see them with e-commerce websites, because with e-commerce come refunds, come cancellations, come warranties, come
Right.
shipping policies. So terms and conditions set the rules, but the reason why I like terms and conditions just about for any website is one, when offering links to third-party websites, you're waiving your, saying, hey, I can't control these third-party websites, therefore I'm not responsible after you click one of these third-party websites.
Mhm.
That's the first reason why I like a terms of service just in general. And then the second reason why I like terms of service is what's called a DMCA notice, which more or less says, hey, we offer imagery and content on our website. We don't necessarily, if we are using any copywritten imagery or material that we're not supposed to be, please let us know. Here's literally all my contact information, and upon request, we'll have it immediately removed. By you offering that type of statement through your terms of service, you create what's called a safe harbor for your business and limit your liability, limit the chances of you being successfully sued for using a licensed image you weren't supposed to, or having copy on the website you weren't supposed to use. So those are the two main reasons why I think a terms of service, AKA a terms and conditions, is a good idea.
Thanks.
What does that acronym stand for? The DMCA?
Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll work for a museum also, because we'll have pictures of old, usually they're given to us by the owner, but there's other people outside of our control posting pictures.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe you have an intern who just isn't thinking one day, and they just post something.
I can find that picture on Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, if anybody thinks of any questions after this, like, I know that always happens to me. Like, I talk to somebody and then 3 hours later, I'm like, oh, that was a good question. You can always just email us. It's just donata@termageddon.com and then hans@termageddon.com. And we're more than happy to answer any questions there too.
You guys are awesome. I really appreciate you coming, especially at such short notice.
Of course.
This is a very valuable, I mean, the more you talk to us, it's like, man, this is something, like when you compared it to SSL, I was thinking about that because at one time SSL was not something most of my clients cared about.
Yeah, we all kind of knew it was kind of nice to have.
Yeah.
Hosting companies would upsell you for, pay an extra $20 a year, get an SSL or something like that, or it's included in your hosting plan.
I wonder if at one time, I mean, this would be future thinking, like, if you're going to buy hosting and have a website, that the condition of having it would be that you have a terms of service. I mean, even like now when you install WordPress, when you install WooCommerce, they make those for you. They kind of make it like, hey, where's your terms of service? Where's your, they make a blank privacy policy for them. They're like, you have to do this. I wonder if, like now SSL for like 95% of the hosts just give it to you. I wonder if one time in the future it'll be like, if you want to go live, you must have this written on something on your site.
I think Google Analytics requires a privacy policy.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not to mention they actually help with your search engine rankings as well.
Right.
Well, actually, no, I don't know that for a fact. Everyone thinks it does.
Right.
I can't necessarily prove that's the case, but Google ranks trust. Google also gives you a higher score in AdWords when you have a privacy policy. So a lot of people connect the dots and say, okay, it helps with SEO.
We should do this, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, yeah, who knows?
But yeah, I hope you guys check us out too. We really like to take the time to take people through our system, show the ins and outs, how it works. I try to demystify this stuff as much as possible because I look like a deer in the headlights about up until a year ago with this stuff. So it really means a lot to be able to help agency owners, especially learn this stuff, be less intimidated. I can't say you'll be fully unintimidated, but I can get you reduce it by 70% for sure. And yeah, if it makes sense, it'd be great to work together too.
The great service. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Yeah, thank you.
As we always say, protect yourself before you wreck yourself. So
Thank you.
Well, and I do know, like you said, you provide the, for the agency. And I don't know if you just did this, WP Engine had a connection with you guys last month. I bookmarked it. I was like, oh.
Gravity Forms. I think it was Gravity Forms.
Oh, Gravity Forms. Okay, I'm sorry. I get them all mixed up.
It's all good.
But I have that there. But
WP Engine and Gravity Forms.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, it's a great service. And also, I know like the times I've mentioned lawyers to some of my smaller customers, like their eyes just kind of roll back in their heads, and the idea of like, well, if you spend this little amount of money, you don't have to do it. You know, but
yeah, what I always say whenever a client says, you know, why don't I just copy and paste a privacy policy from a competitor? What I say is like, look, you know, what I think you should be looking to do is not how do you get a privacy policy. What you should be looking to do is how do I avoid privacy related fines and lawsuits? You know, everyone here is in development. We all know to find a solution, you got to understand what the problem is. And that's a very big misconception. A lot of people they gravitate towards what's the simplest thing. Well, what's the simplest thing to avoid a fine or a lawsuit? That's the big question. So that's what I would suggest.
yeah, that's very good. Thank you.
All right, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Great
Good
chat.
night.
Bye.
Thank you so much.